Late at night, 16-year-old Aisha Brooks stumbles into a rundown Atlanta diner, her head shorn bald, blood trickling from a gash above her ear. Her trembling hands clutch a crumpled flyer from her school's talent show, where she'd sung hours ago. Officer Dwayne Kessler, a towering white cop, smirks outside the window, watching her like a predator savoring prey. People whisper she's just another troubled black teen, but her phone rings and a deep voice growls, "Aisha, I'm coming." Who is he, and what will his arrival unleash? Before diving in, let us know where you're watching from, and if you stand for justice against brutality, hit like and subscribe for more gripping tales of courage. The air inside Carver High School's auditorium buzzed with restless energy on that humid Atlanta evening. Rows of folding chairs creaked under the weight of parents, students, and a handful of teachers who'd stayed late for the annual talent show. The stage lights flickered, casting a warm glow over the worn wooden floor where Aisha Brooks stood, 16 years old and fearless. Her voice, a rich, soulful wave, rolled through the room, silencing the chatter. She sang a ballad she'd written herself, a haunting melody about rising from ashes, her words weaving dreams of a life beyond the cracked sidewalks and sagging porches of her neighborhood. Her long braids, adorned with tiny gold beads, swayed with every note, catching the light like a crown. Her mother, Tanya, had spent hours that morning threading those beads in, her fingers nimble and precise, a ritual they'd shared since Aisha was little. "You're a queen tonight," Tanya had said, kissing her forehead before she left for the show. Now, as Aisha's voice climbed to a breathtaking crescendo, the crowd held its breath, then erupted into applause that shook the rafters. She stood there, chest heaving, soaking in the sound. For once, the weight of her world lifted. Growing up in Atlanta's poorest corner, where gunshots punctuated the night and hope was a rare guest, this moment felt like a miracle. The judges, a trio of tired teachers, shuffled their papers and called her name. First place. A cheap plastic trophy glittered in her hands, but to Aisha it was gold. She clutched it tight, her grin wide enough to split the sky. Whispers rippled through the audience. That girl's got something special. She could be somebody. For the first time, Aisha believed it too. Her best friend Keisha tackled her backstage with a squeal, braids bouncing as she hugged her. "You killed it, girl. You're unstoppable now." Aisha laughed, the sound bright and free, her spirit soaring higher than the rusted water tower looming over her block. The high lingered as she stepped out into the night. The talent show had run late, past 10, and the streets were quiet save for the hum of distant traffic. A light drizzle slicked the pavement, turning the industrial district into a maze of shimmering shadows. Aisha pulled her hoodie up, the trophy tucked under her arm, and started the mile-long walk home. Her sneakers splashed through puddles, the rhythm matching the song still looping in her head. She didn't mind the dark or the damp. Tonight, nothing could touch her. The world felt hers to conquer. She passed shuttered warehouses and a flickering street lamp, humming softly, her braids tapping her shoulders with every step. For a girl who'd dodged eviction notices and patched her own jeans, this victory was a lifeline, a promise of more. Then headlights sliced through the mist behind her. She glanced over her shoulder, squinting as a patrol car rolled up, slow and deliberate, like a shark circling prey. Her stomach tightened, but she kept walking, head down. The car matched her pace, engine growling low until it lurched ahead and cut her off, tires screeching against the curb. Aisha froze, her breath catching as the door swung open. Officer Dwayne Kessler stepped out, a wall of a man, 6'4" with a buzz cut and a jaw carved from stone. His uniform stretched tight across his chest, badge glinting under the streetlight. She'd heard of him, the cop who prowled these streets like a king, his name a warning whispered in corner stores and playgrounds. He fixed his pale blue eyes on her, cold and unblinking, and she felt the night shift. "What's a kid like you doing out here?" His voice was gravel, thick with disdain. He didn't wait for an answer, stepping closer, his boots thudding on the wet asphalt. Aisha clutched her trophy tighter, forcing her voice steady. "I'm just walking home, sir. I was at the talent show at Carver High." She lifted the trophy slightly, proof of her truth, but his gaze slid past it, landing on her braids. His lip curled, a sneer twisting his face. Talent show, huh? Looks more like loitering with intent to me. And those braids? Gang markers if I ever saw 'em? Her heart sank. She'd heard this before, the way cops twisted anything black kids did into a crime. They're just braids, she said, her tone firm but careful. My mom did them for me. I'm not in any gang. Kessler barked a laugh, sharp and mean, like she'd told a joke. Don't lie to me, girl. I know trouble when I see it. He grabbed her arm, his grip iron, and yanked her toward the cruiser. She stumbled, the trophy slipping from her hands to clatter on the pavement. Wait, please, I didn't do anything. Her voice cracked, panic rising as he shoved her against the car. The drizzle turned her hoodie heavy, soaking through to her skin, but the chill came from him. He towered over her, his shadow swallowing. The faint light, and she saw the glint of something in his hand. A pair of rusty clippers, the kind barbers tossed out years ago. "Fa, you think you're special, huh? Winning some little show? Let's fix that attitude." Aisha's eyes widened, her pulse hammering in her ears. "No, please, don't touch me." She twisted, trying to pull free, but his hand clamped harder, bruising her wrist. He flipped the clippers on, the buzz cutting through the quiet like a chainsaw. "Hold still or I'll make it worse," he snarled, pinning her against the cruiser's hood. She kicked, her sneaker grazing his shin, but he didn't flinch. The first swipe of the blades tore through her braids, beads scattering like hail across the asphalt. She screamed, a raw, desperate sound as chunks of hair fell around her feet. Her scalp burned where the clippers snagged, a thin trickle of blood mixing with the rain. He worked fast, brutal, shearing off every braid her mother had woven with love, leaving her head a jagged, uneven mess. Tears streaked her face, hot against the cold night, but she bit her lip to choke back sobs. Kessler stepped back, admiring his work, the clippers still humming in his fist. "There, now you look like what you are, nothing." He tossed the last braid at her feet, its beads glinting dully in the headlights. Aisha sank to her knees, hands shaking as she touched her bare scalp, the sting of the cuts mingling with the ache in her chest. Her trophy lay forgotten, dented in a puddle, its shine dulled. The crowd's applause faded from her mind, replaced by his mocking laughter, echoing in the empty street. "That's better," he said, wiping the clippers on his sleeve. "No more pretending you're somebody. You're just another punk I'll lock up by morning." He grabbed her by the collar, hauling her into the back of the cruiser. The door slammed shut, metal clanging like a cage, and she curled into the seat, her fingers tracing the raw patches where her hair used to be. The car lurched forward, tires crunching over the scattered beads, grinding them into the pavement. She stared out the smeared window, rain streaking the glass, and felt the weight of his words sink in. Her night of triumph, the one thing she'd clawed from the chaos of her life, was gone, stolen by a man who saw her as less than human. Kessler hummed tunelessly as he drove, glancing at her in the rearview mirror with a smirk. "Should have stayed in your place, girl. This city don't need your kind thinking they're stars." Aisha clenched her fists, nails digging into her palms, but said nothing. Her mind raced, replaying the talent show, the cheers, her mother's proud smile. That was real. This couldn't erase it. But as the cruiser sped deeper into the night, the industrial sprawl blurring past, doubt crept in. What if he was right? What if this was all she'd ever be to them? A target, a nobody. She shoved the thought down, focusing on the pain instead, letting it sharpen her resolve. The radio crackled, static breaking the silence, and Kessler picked up the handset, his voice low. "Got one in custody. Suspicious activity. Taking her. Kin now." Aisha's stomach twisted. Custody. That meant the station, a record, a mark she'd never shake. She pressed her forehead against the cool window, the drizzle outside mirroring the storm inside her. Her braids were gone, her trophy trashed, her victory mocked. But something burned beneath the hurt, a flicker of defiance he couldn't touch. She didn't know how, but she'd fight this. She had to. The cruiser turned onto a darker road, the city lights fading behind them, and she braced herself for whatever came next, unaware that this night was only the beginning of a war she'd never imagined. The patrol car rumbled through Atlanta's shadowed outskirts, its engine a low growl that vibrated through Aisha Brooks' bones. She sat hunched in the back seat, wrists raw from twisting against the cuffs Officer Dwayne Kessler had slapped on her. The sting on her scalp pulsed with every bump, fresh cuts from his rusty clippers oozing tiny beads of blood that matted her hoodie's collar. Her braids, once a shimmering cascade of pride, were gone, hacked off in a cruel ritual that still echoed in her mind. She could still hear his laugh, see the glint of his smirk in the rearview mirror as he drove. The talent show trophy she'd won just hours ago lay crumpled in a puddle miles back, its plastic gleam crushed under his tires. Her victory, her one shining moment, felt like a distant dream now, drowned in the reality of this nightmare. Kessler tapped the steering wheel, whistling a jagged tune that grated on her nerves. The radio hissed static, a faint voice cutting through about a disturbance downtown, but he ignored it, his focus locked on her reflection. "You're quiet back there," he said, his voice dripping with mock concern. "What's wrong? Thought you'd be singing for me by now." Aisha clenched her jaw, staring at the smeared window where rain streaked the glass in jagged lines. She wouldn't give him the satisfaction of a reply. Her mind churned, replaying her escape options. The cuffs bit into her skin, but she'd seen worse odds. She'd grown up dodging trouble in a neighborhood where survival was a daily test. This wasn't over yet. The cruiser slowed as Kessler pulled into a gas station lot, the neon sign flickering above a row of pumps. He cut the engine, muttering about needing coffee, and stepped out, leaving the keys dangling in the ignition. Aisha's pulse quickened. Was he that careless, or was this a trap? She watched him lumber toward the store, his broad silhouette, framed by the drizzle-soaked light. The second his back turned, she moved. Her fingers, nimble from years of picking locks on her brother's old bike chain, twisted the cuff's pin against the seat's metal edge. Sweat beaded on her forehead, mixing with the blood trickling from her cuts. Click. One wrist sprang free. Her breath caught. Could she really pull this off? She glanced out the window. Kessler was inside, barking at the cashier, his voice muffled through the glass. Now or never. She popped the second cuff, her hands trembling as she slid to the door. The handle clicked open with a soft thud, and she slipped out, crouching low behind the car. Rain pelted her face, cold and sharp, but it fueled her. She darted across the lot, weaving between pumps, her sneakers slapping wet pavement. Where could she hide? An alley loomed ahead, dark and narrow, promising cover. She sprinted for it, lungs burning, the taste of freedom sharp on her tongue. She'd made it. She'd outsmarted him. The alley swallowed her, its walls slick with grime and shadows. She pressed against a dumpster, catching her breath, her heart a wild drumbeat. A payphone glowed faintly at the far end, its chipped paint barely visible. In the gloom, a lifeline. She stumbled toward it, fishing a quarter from her pocket, and dialed the only number she knew by heart. Her father's. The line crackled, then his voicemail kicked in, deep and steady. "Marcus Brooks, leave a message." Her voice shook as she spoke, words tumbling out in a rush. "Dad, it's me. A cop attacked me, shaved my head, locked me up. I got away, but he's after me. Please, I'm scared. I'm at..." She squinted at a faded street sign. "Porter Street near the gas station. Help me." She hung up, hope flickering like a weak flame. Would he hear it in time? A diner sat across the road, its windows fogged with warmth, a blinking open sign promising refuge. Aisha bolted for it, shoving through the door into a blast of stale coffee and grease. The place was nearly empty, just a trucker nursing. A mug and an older black woman behind the counter, her grey hair pulled tight in a bun. "Miss Clara," the name stitched on her apron read. She looked up, eyes widening at Aisha's shaved head and blood-streaked face. "Lord, child, what happened to you?" Her voice was soft, edged with worry. Aisha sank into a booth, hands shaking. As she clutched the crumpled talent show flyer she'd stuffed in her pocket earlier. "A cop," she whispered. "He did this. I ran." Miss Clara didn't hesitate. She slid a bowl of steaming soup across the table, its warmth curling up in tendrils that soothed Aisha's frayed nerves. "You're safe here, baby. I've seen too many kids like you hurt by men like him." She grabbed a first aid kit from under the counter, dabbing antiseptic on Aisha's cuts with gentle hands. The sting made Aisha wince, but the kindness steadied her. For a moment she believed she'd escaped the worst. Could this stranger really shield her from Kessler's wrath? The trucker glanced over, nodding silently as if he understood, and Aisha felt a flicker of strength return. She sipped the soup, its heat spreading through her chest, and dared to think she'd won this round. Then the diner's door slammed open, a gust of wet air sweeping in with it. Kessler filled the frame, his uniform damp, his face a mask of fury. The keys she'd left in the cruiser dangled from his fist, a taunt. "Thought you could run, huh?" His boots thudded across the linoleum, each step a hammer blow to her fragile hope. Miss Clara stepped forward, hands on her hips. "She's just a girl, officer. Leave her be." Her voice trembled but held firm. Kessler's eyes narrowed, his sneer cutting deeper than the clippers had. "Mind your business, old woman, or I'll shut this dump down. Health code violations, right?" He flashed a badge like a weapon, and Clara faltered, her defiance wilting under the threat. Aisha's stomach dropped. Had she dragged this kind woman into her mess? Kessler grabbed her arm, yanking her from the booth. The soup bowl crashed to the floor, shards scattering like a broken escape. "You're mine now," he growled, snapping the cuffs back on, tighter this time, metal biting into her already bruised wrists. She stumbled as he dragged her outside, the rain soaking her anew. Miss Clara's protests faded behind the closing door, powerless against his authority. Aisha's fleeting freedom vanished, replaced by the cold steel and his hot breath on her neck. How had it fallen apart so fast? He shoved her toward the cruiser, but paused by the diner's trash bins, spotting the talent show flyer she'd dropped in the scuffle. He snatched it up, its edges soggy from the rain, and held it to her face. "This what you're so proud of?" His voice was venom, thick with contempt. He pulled a lighter from his pocket, flicking it alive, and set the paper ablaze. The flames licked up the word's first place, turning her triumph to ash. Aisha lunged, a choked scream escaping her, but the cuffs held her back. The flyer curled and blackened, dropping to the pavement in a smoldering heap. "That's where your dreams belong," he said, stomping the ashes into the mud. Trash. Her vision blurred with tears, but she refused to let them fall. The fire in her chest reignited, fueled by rage now, not just fear. He thought he'd broken her, but he was wrong. She'd survived worse than him. As he shoved her into the cruiser, slamming the door with a clang, she glared at his reflection in the side mirror. His smirk faltered for a split second, and she seized that crack. He could take her hair, her trophy, her night, but not her fight. The engine roared to life and the car peeled out, tires spinning in the wet gravel. She didn't know where he was taking her, but she knew one thing. This wasn't the end. What do you think of Aisha's grit? Comment #1 if you're rooting for her to turn the tables on Kessler. Then hit like and subscribe to see her fight back in this brutal saga. Imagine being stripped of everything you've earned. Just for being you, does that fire you up? Drop your thoughts below, and if you believe no one should face this alone, smash that like button and join the journey by subscribing. Kamai saw Aisha claw her way out of this trap, or will Kessler's next move crush her for good? Stick around to find out what happens when her father's voice finally breaks through the chaos. The cruiser's headlights sliced through the Atlanta night, cutting a path to the 3rd precinct. A squat brick building hunched under a sky thick with rain clouds. Aisha Brooks sat rigid in the back seat, her wrists throbbing beneath the cuffs. Officer Dwayne Kessler had tightened after her failed escape. Her scalp itched where blood had dried, the jagged patches left by his clippers a constant sting. The diner's warmth, Miss Clara's kindness, the fleeting taste of freedom, all of it had slipped away like smoke, leaving her trapped again in his grip. The car jolted to a stop in the precinct's lot, gravel crunching under the tires, and Kessler killed the engine with a flick of his wrist. He stepped out, rain beading on his uniform, and yanked the back door open, his meaty hand closing around her arm. "Move it!" he barked, hauling her into the wet air. Her sneakers skidded on the slick pavement as he dragged her toward the entrance, the precinct's neon sign buzzing overhead, casting a sickly green glow on his smug face. Inside, the air was stale, thick with the smell of burnt coffee and sweat. The bullpen hummed with late-night chaos, phones ringing, radios crackling, officers shuffling papers or leaning back in creaky chairs. Kessler didn't slow, marching her straight through the room, his boots echoing on the scuffed linoleum. Heads turned, eyes locking onto her shaved head, her blood-streaked hoodie, her cuffed hands. A chorus of low whistles and chuckles followed, sharp and mocking, like hyenas circling a wounded animal. "Fresh catch, Kessler," one cop called, his gut straining against his shirt. "Looks like you cleaned her up nice," another jeered, tapping a pen on his desk. Aisha's cheeks burned, but she kept her gaze forward, refusing to shrink. He shoved her into a chair by his desk, the metal cold against her thighs, and loomed over her, his shadow swallowing the dim light from a flickering bulb above. "You're a real prize tonight," he said, loud enough for the room to hear. "Let's show 'em what we've got." He grabbed her chin, forcing her head up, turning her face side to side like she was a trophy on display. The laughter swelled, a wave of scorn that crashed over her. She jerked her head free, glaring at him, her breath ragged. "Get off me," she spat, her voice low but fierce. His smirk widened, eyes glinting with something dark and hungry. "Feisty. That'll make this fun." He turned to his computer, fingers hammering the keys as he pulled up a blank report. The screen's blue glow lit his face, sharpening the lines of his sneer. "Let's see," he muttered, typing with exaggerated slowness. "Suspicious activity, resisting arrest, gang affiliation." He glanced at her, his lip curling. "Those braids screamed trouble, didn't they? Good thing I fixed that." Aisha's stomach twisted. Gang affiliation? He was spinning a lie out of thin air, painting her as a criminal when all she'd done was walk home with a trophy. "That's not true," she said, her tone steady despite the tremor in her chest. "I won a talent show. I'm not in a gang." He didn't look up, just kept typing. The clack of the keyboard a relentless drumbeat. "Sure you're not. Tell it to the judge, sweetheart." Across the room, a younger cop, Officer Tate, lingered by the coffee machine, his brow furrowed as he watched. His uniform hung loose on his lanky frame, his dark eyes darting between Kessler and Aisha. He took a step closer, hesitating, then stopped, clutching his mug like a shield. Aisha caught his glance, a flicker of doubt in it, but he said nothing. His lips pressed into a thin line. Could he see through Kessler's game? She didn't have time to wonder. Kessler leaned back, cracking his knuckles, and grabbed a stack of files, flipping through them with a theatrical grunt. "Gotta make this official. You're gonna love lockup." Her pulse spiked. She wasn't just a target now. She was a project, a notch on his belt. The bullpen's noise dipped for a moment, a phone ringing unanswered, and Aisha's eyes darted around the desk. Kessler's keys sat inches away, tossed carelessly beside his coffee mug, their silver gleam taunting her. Her failed escape at the gas station flashed in her mind, but this was different. Closer quarters, more eyes, higher stakes. She shifted, in the chair, testing the cuffs, her wrists slick with sweat. The room erupted again, a drunk stumbling in from booking, slurring curses as two cops wrestled him down. Kessler turned, barking at them to shut him up, his back to her for a split second. That was it, her chance. Her hand shot out, fingers brushing the keys, snagging them with a quiet jingle. She tucked them into her sleeve, heart slamming against her ribs as Kessler spun back around. "What are you squirming for?" he snapped, eyes narrowing. She froze, forcing her face blank. "Nothing, just cold." He grunted, unconvinced, but waved it off, turning to yell at Tate about the coffee. Aisha's mind raced. The exit was 30 feet away, past a gauntlet of desks and offices. Could she make it? She had to try. The drunk's commotion grew louder, chairs scraping as more cops piled on, and she seized the chaos. She bolted, chair clattering behind her, keys clutched tight. The bullpen blurred as she weaved through, dodging a swinging arm, her sneakers squeaking on the floor. Shouts erupted, a jumble of "Stop her" and "Kessler, your girl's loose." She hit the parking lot door, slamming it open, rain blasting her face as she stumbled outside. The keys shook in her hand, but she found Kessler's cruiser, its black paint slick and gleaming under the lot's floodlights. She'd hot-wired her cousin's Junker once, a dare that felt like kids' play now. The door popped open, and she slid in, fumbling with the wires under the dash. Sparks flew, her fingers trembling, then the engine roared to life. Tires squealed as she peeled out, the precinct shrinking in the rearview mirror. Her breath came in gasps, a wild laugh bubbling. Up, She'd done it. She'd turned his own weapon against him. The road stretched ahead, dark and endless, rain hammering the windshield. She floored the gas, the speedometer climbing, freedom surging through her veins. She could ditch the car, find her dad, end this nightmare. The city lights flickered. In the distance, a beacon pulling her forward. She was unstoppable now, a ghost slipping through his grasp. Then the radio crackled, shattering the silence. Kessler's voice boomed through, thick with rage. "All units be advised. Suspect has stolen a patrol vehicle, black cruiser, license plate Delta Tango 9. Female, black, 16, bald head, armed and dangerous. Carjacking in progress. Converge." On Porter Street now. Aisha's stomach plummeted. Armed and dangerous? She had nothing but his keys and her wits, but he'd spun her into a monster. Sirens wailed in the distance, faint but growing louder. A net closing in. She gripped the wheel, knuckles white, as red and blue lights flashed in the side mirrors. Her escape wasn't a victory, it was a fuse, lighting a manhunt that would hunt her to the ends of the earth. The precinct erupted behind her. Kessler storming out, his face a thunderstorm of fury. He grabbed a radio from another cop, spitting orders as he climbed into a backup SUV. "She's mine. No one takes her. In but me." His tires spun, kicking up gravel as he tore after her, the bullpen buzzing with the thrill of the chase. Tate lingered by the door, watching the chaos unfold, his mug forgotten on a desk. He'd seen her grab the keys, seen the lie in Kessler's report, but his feet stayed rooted, his silence a heavy weight. Aisha didn't know it, didn't see the doubt in his eyes, but it was there, a crack in the wall she'd never breached tonight. The cruiser sped through the rain, weaving past warehouses and empty lots, her breath fogging the windshield. She didn't know where to go, only that she couldn't stop. The sirens grew closer, a howling pack on her tail, and she pushed the gas harder, the needle trembling past 60. She'd escaped the station, turned Kessler's arrogance against him, but the city was waking up now, its eyes and ears tuned to his lies. Her freedom hung by a thread, fragile and fraying, as the night swallowed her deeper into its jaws. She didn't hear the SUV gaining behind her, didn't see the trap snapping shut, but it was coming, fast and unforgiving. Rain lashed the windshield of the stolen cruiser as Aisha Brooks tore through Atlanta's back streets, her hands slick with sweat on the wheel. The engine roared beneath her, a beast she'd tamed with trembling fingers and a tangle of hot-wired cables. Her scalp throbbed, the jagged cuts from Officer Dwayne Kessler's clippers, a cruel reminder of the night's unraveling. Sirens wailed in the distance, their shrieks weaving through the drizzle like a pack of wolves closing in. She'd escaped the precinct, turned his own keys against him, but his voice still haunted her, crackling over the radio minutes ago. Armed and dangerous, carjacking in progress. The lie burned in her chest, twisting her flight into a crime she hadn't committed. She wasn't a thief or a threat, just a 16-year-old girl who dared to dream, now running for her life. The speedometer ticked past 70, the needle jittering as she swerved around a corner, tires screaming on wet asphalt. Streetlights blurred into streaks of yellow, casting fleeting glows on her shaved head reflected in the side mirror. Her hoodie clung to her, soaked from the precinct's lot, but adrenaline kept her warm, pumping through her veins like fire. She fumbled for her phone, its screen cracked from when Kessler had stomped it at the gas station, but it flickered to life. One bar of signal. Enough. She dialed her father, Marcus Brooks, her lifeline in this chaos. The call connected, his deep voice cutting through the static. "Aisha, where are you?" Relief flooded her, but panic sharpened her words. "Dad, I stole his car. He's after me. I'm on..." She squinted at a rusted sign flashing past. "Elliott Road. He's got everyone chasing me. Please hurry." Marcus's tone hardened, steady as steel. "I'm close, baby girl. Hold on. Find a place to ditch that car and hide. I'll get you." The line crackled, then died, her phone's battery giving out with a pitiful beep. She tossed it onto the seat, her mind racing. Hide? Where? The city sprawled around her, a maze of narrow alleys and looming warehouses, but those sirens were relentless, multiplying behind her. She gripped the wheel tighter, weaving through a cluttered intersection, horns blaring as she cut off a delivery truck. The cruiser fishtailed, its back end skidding wildly. But she wrestled it straight, her breath ragged. Could she outrun them? She had to. Marcus was coming. That was her anchor, pulling her forward through the storm. The road opened onto a bridge, its steel girders glinting wetly under the moon. Aisha floored the gas, the engine growling as she hit 80, then 90. Ahead, flashing lights bloomed, a roadblock of 3 patrol cars angled across the lanes, their red and blue pulses slicing the night. Her heart slammed against her ribs. No way through. She jerked the wheel left, aiming for a gap beside the bridge's railing, a slim chance to slip past. Tires screeched, the cruiser lurching as she threaded the needle, clipping a barricade with a shower of sparks. Metal groaned, but she made it, the roadblock shrinking in the rear view. A wild grin broke across her face. She'd done it. She'd beaten them. The bridge stretched ahead, empty and hers, freedom just beyond its end. Then a new sound cut through the rain, a deep, guttural roar. Headlights flared in her mirror, massive and blinding, closing fast. An SUV, black and unmarked, barreled toward her, its grille a snarling beast. Kessler. She recognized the shape of him behind the wheel, his buzz-cut silhouette unmistakable even through the downpour. How had he caught up so quick? Her grin vanished, replaced by a knot of dread. The SUV surged closer, its engine a thunderclap, and she pushed the cruiser harder, the needle trembling at 100. The bridge vibrated beneath her, its cables humming in the wind. But he was relentless, a shadow she couldn't shake. The first impact jolted her forward, the SUV's bumper kissing the cruiser's tail with a sickening crunch. She gasped, gripping the wheel as the car fishtailed again, tires skidding on the slick surface. "Get off me!" she shouted, voice lost in the chaos. But he rammed her again, harder, metal shrieking as the cruiser spun. She fought the wheel, muscles burning, but the third hit was a hammer blow, sending her careening toward the railing. Time slowed, the world tilting as the car smashed through the steel, glass exploding around her in a glittering storm. The cruiser flipped, tumbling, into the ditch below, a bone-rattling crash that swallowed her scream. Darkness swallowed her next, a heavy, suffocating blanket. Pain bloomed everywhere, sharp in her ribs, dull in her skull. She blinked awake, rain dripping through the shattered windshield, stinging her eyes. The cruiser lay on its side, a mangled heap of twisted metal and sparking wires. Her arm hung limp, pinned by the crumpled door, but she was alive, barely. Footsteps crunched outside, slow and deliberate, and Kessler's shadow loomed through the haze. He kicked the wreckage, peering in with a grin that curdled her blood. "Told you you're mine," he said, his voice a low growl over the patter of rain. He reached in, wrenching her free with one brutal yank, her cry muffled by the pounding in her head. She hit the muddy ground, knees buckling, but he didn't let her fall. His fist closed around her hoodie, dragging her upright, her feet scraping the dirt. The world spun, lights flashing in her vision, but she saw the cuffs in his other hand, glinting wetly. He snapped them onto her wrists, the metal colder than the rain, and looped them through a chain he yanked from the SUV's trunk. With a grunt, he hauled her to a rusted pole jutting from the ditch, threading the chain through its base and locking it tight. She was tethered, a prisoner in the muck, the bridge's shadow looming above like a judge's gavel. Kessler crouched in front of her, his breath hot and sour as he gripped her chin, forcing her to meet his gaze. "You thought you'd outrun me? Steal my car and make me look bad?" His grin widened, teeth bared like a wolf's. "Big mistake, girl." She glared back, defiance flickering through the haze of pain, but he didn't care. He stood, pulling her cracked phone from his pocket, its screen spiderwebbed but glowing faintly. He held it up, taunting her with Marcus's last call, then smashed it under his boot, grinding the pieces into the mud with a slow, deliberate twist. "No one's coming for you now," he said, his voice thick with triumph. "Not your daddy, not anyone." Aisha's chest heaved, rain mixing with the blood trickling down her temple. Her phone, her last link to Marcus, was gone, its shards sinking into the earth. The sirens faded, the other cops circling the bridge above. Their lights, a distant blur. Kessler climbed back into the SUV, slamming the door, but he didn't drive off. He sat there, watching her through the tinted window, his grin a permanent scar in the night. She tugged at the chain, metal clanking uselessly, her strength draining with every pull. The crash had taken everything, her speed, her hope, her fight, or so he thought. Deep inside, a spark flickered, fueled by the memory of Marcus's voice. He was close, he had to be. The SUV's engine rumbled, a low threat as Kessler leaned out the window, rain dripping from his cap. "Sit tight, Princess. We've got a long night ahead." He laughed, the sound swallowed by the storm, and settled back, his eyes never leaving her. Aisha slumped against the pole, mud soaking her jeans, her body screaming with every breath. The chase had ended in wreckage. Her daring escape flipped into a trap. She'd dodged the roadblock, outrun the pack, only to crash under his vengeance. But as the rain pounded down, washing the blood from her face, she clung to one truth. This wasn't over, not yet. Picture this: a girl fighting for her life only to be chained like an animal. Does that boil your blood? Comment number 1 if you think Kessler's gone too far, then hit like and subscribe to see if Aisha breaks free from this nightmare. Ever wonder how far someone can push before they snap? Drop your take below, and if you're ready to see justice claw its way back, smash that like button and join the ride by subscribing. What happens when a predator thinks he's won, but his prey's still got teeth? Stay tuned to find out if Aisha's next move turns the hunter into the hunted. The rain had softened to a drizzle, cloaking the night in a damp haze as Officer Dwayne Kessler dragged Aisha Brooks from the muddy ditch beneath the bridge. Her wrists ached, the cuffs biting deeper where he'd chained her to the pole after the crash. Bruises bloomed across her ribs, her head pounded from the cruiser's tumble, and her shaved scalp stung with every drop that trickled over the cuts. The wrecked patrol car lay twisted nearby, its lights flickering faintly, a ghost of her failed escape. Kessler's SUV idled beside it, exhaust curling into the air like a predator's breath. He yanked her upright, her legs wobbling beneath her, and shoved her forward, his grip a vice on her arm. "Time to show the world what happens when you cross me," he growled, his voice thick with malice. She stumbled, mud caking her sneakers, as he hauled her across the broken asphalt toward a gas station just off the highway. Its neon sign buzzed. Overhead, casting a garish red glow over a handful of late-night stragglers. A biker fueling his Harley, a couple arguing by their pickup, a clerk smoking behind the counter. Kessler didn't slow, marching her straight into the lot, the chain between her cuffs clanking with every step. Heads turned, eyes widening at the sight of her. A black teen, bald and bloodied, limping in the grasp of a towering cop. He stopped, under the brightest floodlight, planting her like a trophy, and flipped on his SUV's loudspeaker, its crackle slicing through the quiet. "Folks, take a good look," he boomed, his voice echoing off the pumps. "This here's a thief. Stole. My cruiser crashed it, thought she'd get away. Typical troublemaker." Aisha's stomach churned as the crowd grew, drawn by the spectacle. The biker spat on the ground, muttering something about kids these days. The couple paused their fight, the woman whispering to her boyfriend, who nodded with a sneer. A trucker pulled in, his rig rumbling, and leaned out his window for a better view. Kessler paced around her, his boots splashing in puddles, feeding the growing buzz. "Caught her sneaking around after dark. Gang signs all over her till I cleaned. Her up." He pointed at her shaved head, his grin a slash of white in the dim light. Lies every word, but they lapped it up, their stares hardening with judgment. She stood taller, chin up, refusing to bow, but inside, humiliation clawed at her. "Get a job," the trucker yelled, tossing an empty soda can that bounced off her shin. The biker laughed, a harsh bark, and flicked his cigarette butt her way, its ember sizzling out in the wet gravel. The woman from the pickup stepped closer, snapping a photo with her phone, her lips pursed in disgust. "Should have locked her up sooner," she said, loud enough for Kessler to hear. He nodded, playing to the crowd, his chest puffed out like a king holding court. Aisha's hands balled into fists, the chain rattling, her nails digging into her palms. They didn't know her, didn't care about the talent show, her song, her fight. To them, she was just what he said, nothing. Then headlights flared from the highway, a news van rolling in, its antenna swaying as it parked crookedly across two spaces. A reporter hopped out, a wiry man with a mic, followed by a cameraman hefting, "Gear through the drizzle." Kessler's smirk faltered for a heartbeat, but he recovered, waving them over. "Perfect timing. Get this on tape. Show the city what we're dealing with." The camera's red light blinked on, its lens zeroing in on Aisha, broadcasting her shame to screens she couldn't see. The reporter thrust the mic at her, his voice clipped. "What's your name, kid? Why'd you steal a cop car?" Aisha swallowed, her throat dry as sand, and saw her chance. "I'm Aisha Brooks," she said loud and clear, her gaze locking onto the lens. "I didn't steal anything. He attacked me, shaved my head, cuffed me for no reason. I ran because he's a liar." Her words cut through the murmurs, sharp and raw, and for a moment the crowd stilled. The reporter blinked, caught off guard, but Kessler stepped in front of her, his bulk blocking the shot. "Don't listen to her," he snapped, his tone smooth now, practiced. "She's spinning stories to save herself. Dangerous kid, resisted arrest, the works." The cameraman swung the lens to him, eating up his version, but Aisha saw cracks forming. The trucker shifted, scratching his beard, his scowl softening. The biker glanced at the wrecked cruiser in the ditch, then back at her, his brow creasing. The woman with the phone lowered it, her boyfriend whispering something that made her frown. Aisha's heart thudded. Were they doubting him? She pressed, on, voice rising. "Check the precinct logs. I was at a talent show, not breaking laws." Kessler's hand twitched, his jaw tightening, but before he could shut her up, a phone rang, sharp and insistent, from the biker's pocket. He fished, hit out squinting at the screen, and answered with a gruff "yeah." The voice on the other end crackled through, deep and commanding, loud enough for Aisha to catch it over the drizzle. "This Marcus Brooks. My daughter's missing. You seen a girl, 16, black, bald head near Porter Street." Her breath hitched. Dad. He'd tracked her just like he'd promised. The biker's eyes flicked to her, widening, and he muttered, "Oh yeah, she's right here. Cops got her." Kessler froze, his grin vanishing as the biker held out the phone. "Some guy's looking for you, kid." Aisha lunged for it, chain yanking her back, but Kessler snatched it first, his face darkening. "Who's this?" he barked into the line. Marcus's reply was ice. "Her father. Put her on now." Kessler's grip tightened, knuckles whitening, and he ended the call with a jab of his thumb, tossing the phone back to the biker. "No one's talking to her till I say so," he snarled, but his voice cracked, betraying a flicker of panic. The crowd murmured, the mood shifting, and Aisha seized the moment. "That's my dad. He knows I'm innocent." Her shout rang out, bold and unbroken, and the reporter scribbled furiously, the camera swinging between her and Kessler. The trucker stepped back, muttering to himself, and the biker crossed his arms, staring Kessler down. She'd cracked their certainty, planted a seed of doubt, and for a fleeting second she felt the tide turn. Then Kessler's fist lashed out, a blur of motion catching her temple with a pistol whip that sent her reeling. Pain exploded, white hot, and she crumpled to her knees, the chain clanking as she hit the gravel. Blood trickled warm down her cheek, mixing with the rain, and the world tilted, sounds muffling into a dull roar. "Shut your mouth," he hissed, towering over her, his gun still in hand, its barrel glinting wetly. The crowd gasped, the reporter stepping back, but no one moved to help. The camera kept rolling, capturing her collapse, her defiance snuffed out in a single blow. Kessler grabbed her chain, yanking her up, her vision swimming as he dragged her. Back to the SUV. Her knees scraped the pavement, her body limp but her mind clawing through the fog. He'd silenced her, crushed her moment, but Marcus's voice lingered, a lifeline in the dark. The gas station faded behind them as he shoved her into the passenger seat, slamming the door with a thud that rattled her bones. The engine growled, to life, tires spinning as he peeled out, the crowd's stares shrinking in the side mirror. Blood dripped onto her lap, staining her jeans, and she pressed her cuffed hands to her temple, the pain sharpening her resolve. He thought he'd won, thought he'd buried her fight under that blow, but he was wrong. The SUV barreled down the highway, Kessler's knuckles white on the wheel, his breath heavy with rage. "You just made this worse for yourself," he muttered. eyes flicking to her, then back to the road. "No one's gonna buy your sob story now." Aisha slumped against the window, rain streaking the glass, her reflection a battered shadow. The news van's lights faded in the distance, the crowd scattering, but her words had reached them, reached Marcus. The public shaming had backfired, if only for a moment, and that crack in his armor was all she needed. She didn't know where he was taking her, but she knew one thing: this fight was far from over. The night stretched ahead, dark and unforgiving, and she braced herself for the next blow, her spirit bruised but unbroken. The SUV's engine snarled as Officer Dwayne Kessler barreled through Atlanta's industrial fringes, the city lights fading into a smear of gray behind the rain-streaked windows. Aisha Brooks slumped in the passenger seat, her head throbbing, where his pistol had cracked her temple at the gas station. Blood crusted her cheek, her wrists ached under the cuffs, and her bruised ribs screamed with every jolt of the road. The public shaming still burned in her mind, the jeering crowd, the news camera, her fleeting chance to speak snuffed out by his brutality. Marcus's voice, sharp and urgent through the biker's phone, lingered like a lifeline, but Kessler had severed it, dragging her deeper into his grip. She stared at the dashboard, its glow casting shadows on his clenched jaw, and wondered where this ride would end. The vehicle veered off the highway, tires crunching over gravel as it rolled toward a sprawling, abandoned warehouse. It's rusted, walls loomed in the dark, windows shattered like broken teeth, the air thick with the stench of oil and decay. Kessler killed the engine, the silence sudden and heavy, and yanked her out, his fingers digging into her arm. She stumbled, sneakers catching on jagged concrete, as he hauled her through a gaping doorway into the cavernous interior. Dust hung in the air, stirred by their steps, and faint moonlight filtered through holes in the roof, glinting off a maze of pipes and rotting crates. He shoved her against a thick metal column, its surface cold and slick, and pulled a chain from a nearby pile, looping it through her cuffs with a clank that echoed in the emptiness. "You're done running," he said, his voice low and venomous, locking the chain to the pipe with a padlock that clicked shut like a guillotine. He stepped back, wiping rain from his face, his pale eyes glinting with a predator's glee. Aisha tugged at the restraints, the metal biting her skin, but they held fast, anchoring her in this tomb of shadows. He paced around her, boots thudding on the cracked floor, and leaned in close, his breath hot on her ear. "You know why you're here." She glared at him, silent, her chest tight with defiance. He smirked, pulling a flashlight from his belt and flicking it on, the beam dancing over her shaved head. "Those braids, they marked you. We've been watching your kind for months, trouble's all you bring." Her stomach twisted. "My kind?" she spat, her voice hoarse but steady. "You mean black kids who don't bow to you?" His smirk widened, but his eyes darkened, a storm brewing behind them. "Smart mouth. That's why I shaved you down. Can't have you signaling your little crew." He turned away, pulling out his phone, and dialed a number, his tone shifting to something colder, more formal. "Captain Vickers, it's Kessler. Got the girl secured, warehouse on Fulton. She's a loose end, needs to disappear." Aisha's blood ran cold. Disappear? The word hung in the air, heavy and final, as a gruff voice crackled back, too low for her to catch. Kessler nodded, pocketing the phone, and faced her again. "Boss says you're history. No one'll miss you." Her mind raced, piecing it together. This wasn't just Kessler's vendetta. It was bigger, a system with teeth, and she'd stumbled into its jaws. She scanned the warehouse, eyes darting over rusted beams and scattered debris. A jagged nail jutted from a crate a few feet away, its point glinting in the flashlight's beam. A chance. She shifted, testing the chain slack, her fingers brushing the floor as Kessler rummaged through a duffel bag he'd dragged from the SUV. He pulled out a roll of duct tape and a gas can, setting them down with a thud that made her flinch. What was he planning? She didn't wait to find out. Her hand stretched, trembling, and snagged the nail, its edge sharp against her palm. She worked fast, wedging it into the cuff's lock, twisting with desperate precision. Sweat beaded on her brow, her breath shallow as Kessler's boots scuffed closer. Click. The cuff sprang open, then the other, the chain slipping free with a soft clatter. She froze, heart pounding as he turned, his flashlight sweeping the room. She bolted, diving behind a stack of crates, her body low and silent. A window gaped ahead, its frame jagged with broken glass, promising escape. She lunged for it, climbing through, shards snagging her hoodie as she dropped to the gravel outside. The night air hit her, cold and wet, freedom surging through her veins. She sprinted, legs pumping despite the pain, weaving through a junkyard of rusted hulks and tangled wire. She'd done it again, slipped his grasp, her ingenuity outpacing his cruelty. The warehouse shrank behind her, its shadow fading as she ducked into an alley, chest heaving with triumph. She'd find Marcus, expose Kessler, end this nightmare. Her breath steadied, hope flickering bright until a new sound shattered it. Engines roaring, tires screeching, lights flashing from every direction. A dozen black SUVs screeched into the lot, their doors flying open as armed men poured out, clad in dark tactical gear, faces masked. Captain Vickers stepped from the lead vehicle, a wiry man with a salt and pepper beard and eyes like chipped ice. His voice cut through the drizzle, sharp and commanding. "Fan out? She's here." Aisha's heart sank. This wasn't just Kessler's crew. It was an army, organized and lethal. Tasers crackled as two men flanked her, their boots silent on the wet ground. She turned to run, but a jolt slammed her back, electricity searing through her muscles. She crumpled, gasping, as they dragged her back to the warehouse, her brief escape snuffed out in seconds. Kessler emerged from the doorway, his face a mask of fury and satisfaction, the flashlight dangling from his hand. "Told you she's slippery," he said, cracking his knuckles as Vickers approached, his gaze dissecting her like a specimen. "Good work," Vickers replied, his tone clipped. "But she's seen too much. Can't have her talking," he nodded to Kessler, who grabbed the gas can, unscrewing the cap with a slow, deliberate twist. Aisha's eyes widened, panic clawing her throat as the stench of gasoline filled the air, pieces of her together. "Teach her a lesson," Vickers ordered, his voice cold as steel. Kessler grinned, splashing the liquid over her legs, soaking her jeans as she thrashed against the men holding her. She choked on the fumes, her body trembling as they pinned her to the floor, the cold concrete biting her skin. Kessler knelt beside her, his breath hot on her face. "Should have stayed quiet, girl." He tipped the can, pouring it over her chest, the liquid burning her cuts as she gagged, her vision blurring with tears and terror. Vickers stepped back, lighting a match, its flame a tiny sun in the dark. "No witnesses," he said, dropping it toward her. But Kessler grabbed her arm, yanking her up at the last second, the match fizzling out in a puddle. "Not yet," he snarled. "I want her to scream first." They dragged her to a chair, binding her with rope, the gasoline soaking her clothes. As she struggled, her strength fading. Vickers watched impassive as Kessler loomed over her, his fist raised. The first blow landed, a hammer to her jaw, and she tasted blood, the world spinning as they laughed. She'd escaped, tasted freedom, only to fall into a deeper hell, their cruelty a rising tide she couldn't outrun. Think Aisha's spirit can survive this? Comment, #1 if you believe she'll fight back against these monsters. Then, hit like and subscribe to see her next move. What would you do, cornered by hate with no way out? Share your grit below, and if you're rooting for her to turn the tables, smash that like button and join the battle by subscribing. Can Marcus storm in to save her, or will this trap swallow them both whole? Keep watching to unravel the chaos ahead. The warehouse reeked of gasoline and despair, its rusted walls trembling under the weight of the storm outside. Aisha Brooks sat bound to a splintered chair, her wrists raw from ropes that bit deeper with every futile twist. The cold concrete, floor pressed against her soaked sneakers, the gasoline drenching her clothes, stinging the cuts on her scalp and the fresh bruise swelling her jaw. Officer Dwayne Kessler loomed over her, his fist still clenched from the blow he'd landed moments ago, his breath ragged with exertion. Captain Vickers stood nearby, his icy gaze flickering between her and the shadows, a predator sizing up, his kill. The tactical team he'd summoned lingered at the edges, their masked faces blank, weapons glinting in the dim light filtering through broken windows. She'd escaped their grasp once, only to be dragged back into this hell, her body battered but her spirit clawing for air, Kessler wiped sweat from his brow, his smirk twisting into something feral as he circled her. "You're tougher than you look, I'll give you that," he said, his voice a low growl. "But toughness don't mean squat now." He grabbed a rusty pipe from a pile of debris, twirling it in his hand, the metal scraping against the floor with a sound that set her teeth on edge. Aisha's chest heaved, gasoline fumes burning her lungs, but she met his stare, her eyes blazing through the haze of pain. "You're scared," she rasped, blood trickling from her lip. "That's why you keep hitting me." His smirk faltered, replaced by a snarl, and he raised the pipe ready to shatter her defiance. Then the warehouse doors exploded inward, a deafening crash that shook the walls and sent dust cascading from the rafters. Headlights flooded the space, blinding and relentless, as a black armored truck roared through, tires screeching on the concrete. Kessler spun, pipe clattering to the floor, his shout lost in the chaos. Armed figures poured from the vehicle, clad in tactical gear, their movements precise and lethal. Gunfire erupted, sharp cracks splitting the air as Vickers' men scrambled, returning fire with panicked bursts. Aisha's heart leapt, hope surging despite the ropes cutting her skin. She knew that truck, that force. Marcus Brooks had arrived. Her father stormed in last, a towering figure at 6'5", his ex-Marine frame filling the doorway like a wall of vengeance. His dark eyes locked onto her, cutting through the smoke and muzzle flashes, his jaw tight with fury. He carried a shotgun, its barrel steady as he advanced, his DEA team fanning out behind him. Bullets pinged off rusted beams, sparks raining down as the two forces clashed. Marcus didn't flinch, his voice booming over the din. "Aisha, hold on!" She tugged at the ropes, adrenaline masking the pain, her gaze fixed on him as he carved a path toward her. Kessler lunged for cover behind a crate, dragging Vickers with him, their shouts drowned by the gunfire. Marcus's team moved like a machine, dropping Vickers' men one by one, their bodies crumpling to the floor in heaps of black cloth and blood. Aisha's breath hitched as a stray bullet whizzed past her ear, embedding in the wall with a thud. Marcus reached her, his shotgun blasting a masked figure who'd aimed at her. The man's scream cut short as he fell. Her father knelt beside her, his calloused hands tearing at the ropes with a knife from his belt, the blade slicing through the cords in seconds. "You're safe now," he said, his voice steady but thick with relief, pulling her into his arms. As the ropes fell away, she collapsed against him, her legs trembling, the gasoline-soaked fabric of her hoodie clinging to his chest. His warmth anchored her, a shield against the chaos, and for a moment she believed it was over. The gunfire slowed, Marcus's team mopping up the last of Vickers' squad, their efficiency brutal and absolute. Bodies littered the floor, the hair thick with cordite and death. But she was free, her father's strength holding her upright. She buried her face in his shoulder, the sting of her cuts and the ache of her bruises fading under his grip. "I knew you'd come," she whispered, her voice cracking. He pulled back, brushing a thumb over her bloodied cheek, his eyes fierce. "Always, baby girl. Let's get you out of here." He stood, lifting her with one arm, his shotgun ready in the other, and turned toward the truck, barking orders to his team. "Secure the perimeter. We're moving." Aisha clung to him, her vision swimming, the warehouse a blur of shadows and wreckage. She'd survived Kessler's torment, Vickers' trap, and now she was safe, the nightmare peeling away with every step toward the exit. Marcus's men flanked them, weapons raised, their boots pounding the concrete in unison. The truck's engine rumbled, its headlights slicing through the drizzle outside, promising escape. She let out a shaky breath, relief washing over her like a tide. Then a low hum buzzed beneath the floor, a vibration that climbed her spine and froze her blood. Before she could speak, Vickers' voice cut through the chaos, sharp and desperate, from behind a toppled crate. "You think you've won?" He staggered up, blood streaming from a gash on his arm, his free hand clutching a remote detonator, its red light blinking furiously. Kessler lurched beside him, clutching a pistol, his face a mask of rage. "Take her back," Vickers shouted, slamming his thumb on the button. A deafening roar erupted, the warehouse trembling as hidden charges ignited along the walls. The ceiling buckled, steel beams snapping like twigs, raining down in a storm of fire and debris. Aisha screamed, her voice lost in the blast, as Marcus, threw himself over her, his body a shield against the collapsing world. Concrete shattered around them, dust choking the air, flames licking up the walls as the roof caved in. The force flung them forward, his grip tightening as they hit the floor, rolling toward the truck. Pain seared through her, a fresh wave crashing over her battered frame, but Marcus held fast, his breath ragged against her ear. "Stay with me," he grunted, dragging her through the rubble, his team scattering as the inferno roared. She coughed, lungs burning, her eyes stinging from smoke as they stumbled toward the exit. The truck loomed ahead, its doors flung open by a surviving agent. But the warehouse was a death trap now, its structure groaning under the explosions. Marcus's men fired back, their shots wild as Vickers and Kessler vanished into the haze, swallowed by the chaos they'd unleashed. A beam crashed down, missing them by inches, its impact shaking the ground. Aisha's legs buckled, but Marcus hauled her up, half carrying her through the smoke, the heat searing her skin. They reached the truck, tumbling inside as the driver gunned the engine, tires spinning on the slick concrete. The vehicle lurched forward, smashing through the crumbling doorway just as the warehouse buckled fully, a fireball erupting behind them. Aisha clung to Marcus, her body pressed against his, the truck rocking as it sped into the night. Rain pelted the windshield, washing away the soot and blood streaking her face, but the blast's echo lingered, a reminder of how close they'd come. She glanced back, the inferno shrinking in the distance, its orange glow swallowing the nightmare she'd endured. Marcus's arm tightened around her, his chest heaving, his shotgun resting across his lap. "You're okay," he said, more to himself than her, his voice rough with exhaustion. But the victory felt hollow. Vickers and Kessler had slipped away, wounded but alive, their shadows stretching beyond the flames. The truck rumbled down a back road, Marcus's team silent, their faces grim under smeared visors. Aisha's head lolled against his shoulder, her strength draining as the adrenaline faded, leaving only pain and questions. She'd been saved, pulled from the abyss by the man who'd always been her rock, but the cost was etched in the blood on her hands, the wreckage in her wake. The explosions had leveled their trap, but not their resolve. She felt it in her gut. They weren't done. Marcus stared ahead, his jaw set, his free hand brushing her jagged scalp where her braids once hung. "They'll pay for this," he vowed, his words a quiet thunder. Aisha nodded, her eyes heavy, the night blurring outside the window. The rescue had torn her from their claws, but the war was just beginning, and she knew the next strike would be worse. The truck sped on, carrying them into the dark, battered but unbroken, a father and daughter bound by blood and fire. The armored truck rumbled through the Georgia backroads, its tires chewing up mud as the rain tapered into a faint mist. Aisha Brooks sat slumped against her father, Marcus Brooks, in the back seat, her body a map of pain, bruises darkening her, ribs, cuts stinging her shaved scalp, gasoline-soaked clothes clinging to her skin. The warehouse explosion still roared in her ears, its flames a vivid scar in her mind, but Marcus's arm around her was a tether, pulling her back from the edge. His ex-Marine frame dwarfed her, his steady breathing a rhythm she clung to as the truck's interior hummed with quiet tension. His DEA team sat rigid in their seats, weapons resting on their laps, faces shadowed by visors streaked with soot. The night stretched endless outside, a shroud hiding them from the chaos they'd left behind. Marcus shifted, his dark eyes scanning her battered form, his jaw tight with restrained fury. "We're taking you somewhere safe," he said, his voice low and firm, brushing a hand over her jagged scalp where her braids once swung. "A safe house off the grid. Kessler and Vickers won't find us there." Aisha nodded, her throat too raw to speak, the weight of the night pressing down, like a stone. She'd been shaved, beaten, chained, and nearly burned alive, but Marcus had stormed in, a one-man army, and pulled her from the fire. The truck jostled over a rut, jarring her ribs, and she winced, leaning harder into him. Safety sounded like a dream, fragile and distant, but with him she believed it. The journey stretched into silence, the road narrowing as trees thickened into a dense wall of pine and oak. After an hour, the truck slowed, turning onto a dirt path that snaked through. The woods to a weathered cabin, its wood greyed by time, windows dark and shuttered. The driver cut the engine, and Marcus helped Aisha out, her legs trembling as they hit the ground. The air smelled of damp earth and pine needles, a stark contrast to the gasoline and smoke she'd choked on. He guided her inside, the door creaking, open to reveal a sparse room, a sagging couch, a wood stove, a table littered with maps. "Rest here," he said, easing her onto the couch, his touch gentle despite the calluses on his hands. "I'll get you cleaned up." She sank into the cushions, exhaustion pulling at her bones as Marcus rummaged through a duffel bag, pulling out a first aid kit and a bottle of water. He knelt beside her, dabbing antiseptic on her cuts with a tenderness that clashed with his. Hulking sighs, his brow furrowed as he worked. "You're healing already," he muttered, wrapping gauze around her wrist where the cuffs had torn her skin. Aisha sipped the water, its coolness soothing her parched throat, and felt a flicker of strength return. She was alive, with him, in a place they couldn't touch. For the first time in hours, she let herself breathe. The cabin's quiet, wrapped around her like a balm, broken only by the crackle of the stove Marcus lit with a handful of logs. She watched the flames dance, their warmth seeping into her chilled skin, and spotted a spool of yarn on a shelf, its red strands tangled but bright. An idea sparked. She grabbed it, her fingers shaky but determined, and started braiding a makeshift wig, weaving the yarn into tight rows. It wasn't her mother's careful work, not the beaded crown she'd lost, but it was something, a piece of herself reclaimed. Marcus glanced over, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "That's my girl," he said, pride softening his voice. "They can't take that from you." She tied off the last braid, slipping the wig over her scalp, its weight a small comfort against the raw patches. The act steadied her, a quiet rebellion against Kessler's cruelty, and she leaned back, letting the stove's heat dry her soaked jeans. Marcus sat across from her, cleaning his shotgun with practiced ease, the metal gleaming in the firelight. "We'll stay here a day, maybe two," he said, his tone measured. "Then we move, hit them where it hurts." Aisha nodded, her mind drifting to the warehouse, to Vickers' detonator, Kessler's pipe. They'd escaped, but they weren't beaten. She'd make them pay too. A knock rattled the door, sharp and sudden, jolting her upright. Marcus tensed, shotgun in hand, and signaled her to stay put as he crept to the window, peering through a crack in the shutters. "It's Ruiz," he muttered, relaxing slightly, and opened the door. Agent Ruiz stepped in, a wiry man with a buzz cut and a DEA badge clipped to his vest, his arms loaded with a crate of supplies, food, bandages, ammo. "Heard the call," Ruiz said, setting the crate on the table, his voice clipped but warm. "Figured you'd need this." Marcus clapped him on the shoulder, a rare grin breaking through. "Good man, we're in deep now." Ruiz nodded, glancing at Aisha with a sympathetic frown. "You're a tough kid," he said, unpacking the crate. "Kessler's a bastard, but we'll bury him." She forced a weak smile, the yarn wig shifting as she sat up straighter. His presence felt like a lifeline, another layer of protection, and she let herself relax as Marcus and Ruiz talked strategy, their voices a low hum over the stove's crackle. She closed her eyes, the weight of the night pulling her under, trusting them to guard her sleep. The cabin's peace shattered with a muffled click. Her eyes snapped open, heart lurching as Ruiz stood over Marcus, a pistol pressed to his temple. Marcus froze, shotgun clattering to the floor, his hands raised as betrayal twisted his face. "Ruiz, what the hell?" he growled, but the agent's gaze was cold, unyielding. "Sorry, Brooks," Ruiz said, his voice flat. "Vickers pays better." Aisha lunged, a scream tearing from her throat, but Ruiz swung the gun toward her, freezing her mid-step. "Sit," he barked, and she dropped back, her pulse hammering as he pulled a phone from his pocket, dialing with one hand. "Vickers, it's done," Ruiz said into the line, his eyes never leaving them. "Brooks and the girl pinned at the safe house. Send the convoy." The call ended with a snap and he tossed the phone onto the table, his smirk a jagged echo of Kessler's. Aisha's stomach churned. A mole, right under their noses, turning their sanctuary into a trap. "Marcus," shifted, his voice deadly calm. "You'll regret this." Ruiz laughed, a hollow sound, and fired, the shot cracking through the cabin as Marcus grunted, clutching his leg, blood seeping through his pants. Aisha dove for the table, snatching a shard of glass from a broken jar in the crate, her fingers slick with sweat. Ruiz turned, gun raised, but she was faster, slashing the shard across his wrist. He cursed, the pistol slipping as blood sprayed, and she tackled him, driving the glass into his thigh. He roared, shoving her off, but Marcus surged up, ignoring his wound, and slammed Ruiz against the wall, knocking him cold with a single blow. Aisha scrambled to her father, tearing a strip from her hoodie to bind his leg, her hands shaking as blood soaked the fabric. Marcus grunted, shoving Ruiz's limp body aside, and grabbed a rifle from the crate. "We're out of time," he said, limping to the window. Headlights pierced the trees, a convoy of black SUVs roaring down the path, their engines a rising thunder. Aisha grabbed the glass shard, her makeshift weapon, and followed him to the door, her yarn wig slipping, but her resolve iron. Vickers' voice crackled over a megaphone outside, chillingly clear. "Burn it down, no survivors." Flames flickered from Molotov cocktails lobbed through the windows, glass shattering as fire erupted inside. Marcus kicked the door open, firing into the night as Aisha ducked low, the cabin blazing behind them. They stumbled into the woods, smoke choking the air, the safe house collapsing in a roar of heat and ash. Vickers had framed her for Ruiz's murder, his body fuel for the fire, and now hunted them with relentless fury. She clung to Marcus, her heart a war drum as they vanished into the trees, the convoy's light sweeping closer. Ever felt trust turn to ash in an instant? Comment. Number 1. If you think Ruiz got what he deserved, then hit like. And subscribe to see this fight explode further. What's it like when your safe haven becomes a kill zone? Drop your reaction below, and if you're raging for Aisha and Marcus to strike back, smash that like button and join the chase by subscribing. Can they outrun Vickers' inferno? Or will this betrayal bury them alive? Stay locked in to see who rises from the flames. The forest swallowed Aisha Brooks and her father, Marcus Brooks, as they fled the burning safe house, the crackle of flames chasing them through the Georgia night. Smoke stung her lungs, her makeshift yarn wig slipping as branches snagged her. Gasoline-soaked hoodie. Marcus limped beside her, his leg bleeding through the hasty bandage she'd tied after Ruiz's betrayal, his rifle gripped tight in one hand. The safe house collapsed behind them, a pyre of shattered trust, its roar drowned by the hum of Captain Vickers' convoy tearing through the woods. Molotov cocktails had turned their refuge to ash, and now Vickers' voice echoed through a megaphone, cold and commanding. "Find them. No loose ends." Aisha's heart pounded, her bruised ribs screaming with every step, but she pushed forward, the shard of glass from the cabin clutched like a lifeline in her fist. They ducked behind a gnarled oak, its trunk wide enough to shield. Them as headlights swept the undergrowth, tires crunching over roots. Marcus pressed a finger to his lips, his dark eyes scanning the shadows, his breath ragged but controlled. The convoy fanned out, engines growling as men shouted orders, their boots snapping twigs in the damp earth. Aisha's chest tightened, the memory of Ruiz's pistol against Marcus's temple flashing hot and vivid. They'd trusted him, let him in, and he'd sold them to Vickers, framing her for his murder as the cabin burned. She glanced at Marcus, his face etched with pain and fury, and knew they couldn't stay here. "We need to move," she whispered, her voice barely a thread. He nodded, pointing west toward a faint glow beyond the trees. "Town's that way, we'll lose them there." They crept through the brush, mud sucking at her sneakers, the glass shard digging into her palm as she steadied Marcus. His limp slowed them, blood seeping darker with every stride, but he gritted his teeth, his ex-Marine grit carrying them forward. The forest thinned, giving way to a quiet road, its asphalt glistening wet under a lone street lamp. A gas station flickered, in the distance its sign buzzing faintly, and beyond it the hum of a small town waking to dawn. They slipped into an alley behind the station, the stink of diesel mixing with the smoke clinging to her clothes. Marcus leaned against a dumpster, catching his breath, while Aisha scanned the street. A library sat across the road, its windows dark, a relic of faded brick and peeling paint. "There," she said, nodding toward it, "Computers, we can fight back." He frowned, his brow creasing with doubt, but followed as she darted across, her steps light despite the ache in her bones. The library's back door hung loose, its lock rusted and weak, and she shouldered it open, the hinges groaning in protest. Inside, dust coated the shelves, the air thick with the musty scent of old paper. A row of ancient computers glowed dimly in a corner, their screens flickering to life as she powered one on. Marcus sank into a chair beside her, his rifle resting across his lap, his eyes darting to the windows. "What's the plan?" he asked, his voice rough. Aisha's fingers flew over the keys, her mind racing. "The news caught me at the gas station. I told them Kessler's a liar. We've got proof now." She pulled a cracked USB drive from her pocket, salvaged from the safe house before the fire, and plugged it in. It held shaky footage she'd recorded on her phone days ago. Kessler shaving, her head cuffing her, taunting her in the cruiser. The file loaded, grainy but damning, his sneering face clear as he hacked off her braids. She uploaded it to a local news site, her hands trembling as she typed a headline. "Rogue cop attacks teen, burns safe house to silence her." She added a clip of the warehouse explosion, captured by Marcus's team before the chaos, and hit send, the screen flashing as it went live. "This'll blow it open," she said, her voice fierce. "They can't bury this." Minutes ticked by, the library silent save for the hum of the computers, until the screen erupted with alerts. The video spread like wildfire, comments flooding, shares spiking across social media. "Kessler's a monster," one read. "This girl's a hero," another cheered. Protests flared online, hashtags trending as Atlanta woke to the outrage. Aisha's chest swelled, a spark of triumph cutting through her exhaustion. The public was turning, their voices rising to drown Vickers' lies. Marcus squeezed her shoulder, his grip firm despite the blood staining his sleeve. "You did it. Baby girl, they're with us now." She nodded, the yarn wig itching her scalp, a symbol of her fight reborn in the digital storm. Then the screen shifted, a breaking news banner slicing through the feed. "Fugitive teen suspected in cop murder, safe house arson," it blared, a grainy photo of her flashing beside a shot of the burning cabin. Aisha's stomach dropped, her breath catching as a slick anchor's voice narrated over doctored footage. Ruiz's body dragged from the wreckage, Kessler's tearful testimony claiming she'd ambushed him, Vickers swearing she'd bombed the warehouse to cover her. Tracks. "Aisha Brooks, 16, armed and dangerous," the anchor intoned. "A terrorist on the run with her father. A disgraced DEA agent." Marcus cursed, slamming a fist on the table, the sound echoing in the quiet room. "They flipped it," he growled. "Vickers owns the narrative now." Her hands shook as she scrolled, the tide turning against them. Fake evidence flooded the web. Forged texts linking her to a non-existent gang. Doctored logs pinning Ruiz's death on her shard of glass. Photos of Marcus fleeing the scene. Protests morphed into outrage. Demands for her arrest drowning out the truth. The library's silence pressed in, suffocating, as the world branded her a killer. She'd fought back, exposed Kessler, only to be buried under Vickers' lies, her victory twisted into a noose. Marcus pulled her close, his voice steady despite the chaos. "We'll fix this, they can't erase what we've got." But doubt gnawed at her, sharp and cold, as sirens wailed in the distance, closing in. The library door rattled, a heavy thud that jolted her upright. Marcus grabbed his rifle, shoving her behind a shelf as riot police stormed in, shields raised, batons gleaming. "Aisha Brooks, Marcus Brooks, surrender now!" a voice boomed, amplified by a bullhorn outside. She gripped the glass shard, her pulse racing as Marcus aimed through the shelves, his leg trembling but his resolve iron. "Stay low," he whispered, firing a warning shot that splintered a window, glass raining onto the street. The police surged forward, tear gas canisters clattering across the floor, smoke billowing as Aisha coughed, eyes burning. She darted for the back door, Marcus covering her, his shots buying seconds as the gas choked the air. They burst into the alley, the dawn grey and heavy, sirens screaming from every corner. Marcus stumbled, his wound slowing him, but Aisha pulled him along, her strength flaring despite the bruises. They dove into a sewer grate, prying it open with the shard, the stench of rot hitting her, as they dropped into the muck below. Water sloshed around her knees, the tunnel dark and tight. But she pushed forward, dragging Marcus as the police swarmed above, their shouts fading into the earth. The media storm had turned the city against her, Vickers' lies painting her as a monster, but she'd slipped their grasp again, a ghost in the shadows. The sewer stretched endless, its walls slick with grime, the drip of water a steady pulse in the gloom. Marcus leaned against her, his breath labored, blood trailing behind them in the murk. "They've got the world fooled," he muttered, his voice thick with pain. But not for long. Aisha clenched the shard, her yarn wig sodden but clinging to her scalp, a defiant crown in the dark. The footage was out there, the truth buried under Vickers' web, but she'd claw it back. Above, helicopters buzzed, their blades chopping the air while Marcus's capture played on repeat, his bloody face beaten live on TV, a confession forced from his lips. She stopped, bracing him against the tunnel wall, her chest heaving. As the weight sank in, the media had crowned her a terrorist, Marcus a traitor, their fight twisted into a manhunt. Vickers had won this round, his convoy circling the city, his lies louder than her truth. But she wasn't done. The sewer hid them, a lifeline in the chaos, and she'd use it to strike back, to shatter his empire. Marcus gripped her hand, his eyes fierce despite the blood loss. "We're still here," he said, a vow carved in stone. "That's enough." Aisha nodded, the shard glinting in her fist, the storm above roaring as they vanished deeper into the dark. The sewer's dank air clung to Aisha Brooks like a second skin as she hauled her father, Marcus Brooks, through the murky tunnel beneath Atlanta. Water sloshed around her knees, its icy bite seeping through her soaked jeans, the gasoline stench. From her clothes mingling with the rot of the underground. Marcus leaned heavily on her, his leg a bloody mess from Ruiz's gunshot, his breath ragged as he gripped his rifle with whitening knuckles. The media storm raged above, branding her a terrorist and him a traitor, Vickers' lies drowning out. The truth she'd unleashed online. Her scalp stung under the sodden yarn wig, cuts throbbing from Kessler's clippers, but the glass shard in her fist gleamed, a jagged promise of defiance. They'd escaped the library raid, slipping into the sewers as riot police closed in, but safety was a ghost, and every echo of dripping water sounded like pursuit. Marcus stumbled, his weight dragging her down, and she braced him against the slimy wall, her chest heaving. "We can't stop," she whispered, her voice hoarse, eyes darting through the gloom. He nodded, sweat beading on his brow despite the chill, his ex-Marine grit fraying but unbroken. "Vickers' place," he rasped, pointing down the tunnel with his rifle. "He's holed up there. We end this tonight." Aisha's pulse quickened, the name a spark to her smoldering rage. Captain Vickers, the puppet master behind Kessler's brutality, had turned the city against them, framed her for murder, and burned their safe house to ash. His mansion, a fortress of corruption, was their last shot. She'd free Marcus, expose them all or die trying. They slogged through the muck, the tunnel narrowing until it spat them out near a storm drain, its grate rusted and loose. Aisha wedged the shard into the gap, prying it open with a groan of metal, and they crawled into the night, mud caking her hands as she pulled Marcus through. The air hit her, crisp and wet, the distant hum of helicopters slicing the dawn. Vickers' estate loomed a mile off, its spires piercing the tree line, floodlights sweeping the grounds like a prison. She helped Marcus stand, his arm slung over her shoulder, and they limped through the woods, shadows their only cover. His blood left a trail, a risk she couldn't stop, but speed was their shield now. The mansion's perimeter was a wall of stone and wire, its gate guarded by men in black fatigues, rifles slung across their chests. Aisha crouched behind a thicket, her breath shallow, studying the layout. Marcus pointed to a drainage ditch snaking under the wall, its mouth barely wide enough for a person. "There," he muttered, his voice tight with pain. "Basement access." She nodded, her mind racing, and they crawled through the underbrush, thorns snagging her hoodie as they reached the ditch. The water was shallow, stinking of runoff, but she slid in first, guiding Marcus down, his grunt muffled as he splashed beside her. They inched through, the pipe claustrophobic, until it opened into a dank basement, its walls lined with crates and flickering bulbs. She pulled him onto the concrete, his leg trembling as he propped himself against a stack of boxes. Voices drifted. From above, clipped and urgent, and she crept to a rusted vent, peering up. A hallway stretched beyond, Vickers' men pacing with radios, their chatter confirming her fear. Marcus was their prize, beaten and confessing on live TV. A lie. To bury them deeper, she slipped back, her glass shard glinting as she rummaged through a crate, finding a pair of tasers, their charge humming faintly. "I'm getting you out," she said, pressing one into Marcus's hand. He gripped it, his eyes fierce despite the blood pooling beneath him. "Go," he urged. "I'll hold here." Aisha climbed a service ladder, her sneakers silent on the rungs, emerging into a corridor lined with oak and steel. The mansion pulsed with activity, guards barking orders, as TVs blared the news. Her face Marcus's battered mugshot, Vickers' voice vowing justice. She darted through shadows, the taser a live wire in her grip, until she reached a locked door, its keypad glowing red. Her fingers danced over it, guessing codes from memory, Vickers' arrogance in plain sight, and it clicked open, revealing a basement cell block, its air thick with damp and despair. Marcus sat chained inside the farthest cell, his face swollen, blood crusting his lips, but alive, his real self, not the puppet on TV. She raced to him, her shard jimmying the lock with a twist, the metal snapping free. "Aisha," he croaked, his voice a lifeline as she cut his ropes, her hands steady despite the tremor in her chest. He stood, swaying, but grabbed her shoulder, strength flaring through his pain. "You're insane," he muttered, a ghost of a smile breaking through. She handed him the second taser, her own buzzing as they slipped out, victory pulsing in her veins. They'd done it. Broken Vickers' cage, and now they'd expose the truth together. The corridor stretched ahead, a car waiting beyond the garage. She could taste it. Freedom so close it burned. They moved fast, her arm under his, dodging a guard with a silent jolt from her taser, his body crumpling as they pressed on. The garage loomed, its bay doors half open, a sleek sedan gleaming inside. She propped Marcus against the wall, hot-wiring the ignition with the shard, the engine purring to life as he climbed in, blood streaking the seat. She slid behind the wheel, tires squealing as she floored it. The doors parting just enough to slip through. The night opened before them, the mansion shrinking in the rear view, her heart soaring. They'd won, beaten the odds, a father and daughter, unbroken by Vickers' machine. Then floodlights blazed, a wall of light blinding her as Vickers' private militia swarmed the driveway, a dozen SUVs roaring from the shadows. Men in tactical gear spilled out, rifles raised, their shouts a deafening wave. Aisha swerved, the sedan fishtailing, but a bullet punched through the windshield, grazing her arm, blood blooming hot and fast. Marcus fired his taser through the window, dropping one, but the odds crushed her hope. Vickers stepped from the lead vehicle, his salt and pepper beard stark under the lights, a megaphone in hand. "End of the line," he bellowed, his voice a death knell. "You're done, Brooks." She slammed the brakes, the car skidding to a stop, surrounded, her breath hitching as Vickers' men closed in. Marcus gripped her hand, his voice steady, despite the blood pooling at his feet. "Keep fighting," he said, but Vickers raised a pistol, aiming at her through the shattered glass. The shot rang out, a thunderclap, and Marcus lunged, shoving her down as the bullet tore into his chest. Blood sprayed, his body slumping over her, a shield to the last. Aisha screamed, a raw, guttural sound, as Vickers barked orders, his men yanking the doors open. She fought, slashing with the shard, but a rifle butt cracked her skull, stars exploding as they dragged her out. Marcus hit the ground, motionless, blood spreading beneath him, and Vickers loomed over her, his pistol pressed to her forehead. "You should have stayed down," he said, his eyes cold as ice. He turned to a camera crew emerging from an SUV, their lens trained on Marcus's body, broadcasting live. "Here's your terrorist," Vickers declared, his voice triumphant. "Shot resisting arrest, justice served." Aisha thrashed, her vision blurring, but hands pinned her, the yarn wig torn away, her defiance stripped bare. The broadcast flared, Marcus's execution a public slaughter. Vickers lie sealing her fate as the militia hauled her to a van, her screams lost in the dawn. She kicked her shard-slicing air, but they slammed her against the van's side, cuffing her as Vickers watched, his smirk a blade in her gut. Marcus lay still, his blood a dark pool, the world believing he'd died a traitor. The rescue had flipped into a massacre, Vickers' men swarming like locusts, her lone stand crumbling under his weight. She'd freed him, tasted victory, only to lose him to a bullet meant for her, the mansion's gates closing behind her as the van's engine roared. The city watched, Vickers, narrative unchallenged, and she was alone, a hunted shadow with nothing left but rage. The van's engine growled as it sped through Atlanta's pre-dawn streets. Aisha Brooks cuffed and shoved against its cold metal wall, her body a tapestry of pain and defiance. Blood trickled from a gash on her forehead where Vickers' men had struck her, her scalp raw without the yarn wig they'd ripped away, and her arm throbbed from a bullet graze sustained in the mansion's driveway. Marcus Brooks lay dead in her mind's eye, his chest torn open by Vickers' shot, his body sprawled in the mud as cameras broadcast his execution to a city deceived. She'd freed him from that basement cell, hot-wired the car, tasted escape, only to watch him die shielding her, his blood soaking her hands as they dragged her away. The glass shard, her last weapon, was gone, pried from her fist, leaving her empty but burning with rage. The militiamen sat across from her, their rifles resting on their knees, faces masked but eyes glinting with cold triumph. Captain Vickers rode up front, his voice a muffled bark through the partition, directing the driver with clipped precision. Officer Dwayne Kessler wasn't with them, his absence a gnawing void. She'd last seen him in the warehouse, his pipe raised to break her. But now he was a ghost, his cruelty woven into Vickers' larger web. The van jolted over a pothole, jarring her bruised ribs, and she bit back a groan, her glare cutting through the dim interior. They thought they'd won, thought Marcus's death had crushed her, but they didn't know the fire he'd left in her veins, her wrists twisted against the cuffs, metal scraping her skin as she replayed the night. The talent show victory, Kessler's clippers, the warehouse torture, the safe house betrayal, the media's lies, and now this, her father gunned. Down on live TV, each blow had built this moment, a breaking point where grief and fury forged something unbreakable. She closed her eyes, Marcus's last words echoing, "Keep fighting." He died for her, a shield to the end, and she wouldn't let Vickers bury his truth. The van slowed, tires crunching gravel, and she snapped alert, peering through a slit in the armored siding. A storm drain loomed ahead, its mouth gaping like a wound in the earth, the city's underbelly her only refuge now. The driver cursed, swerving as a deer darted across the road, and the van lurched, the men bracing themselves. Aisha seized the split-second chaos, slamming her shoulder into the nearest guard, his rifle clattering as he stumbled. She kicked his knee, bone crunching, and lunged for the weapon, her cuffed hands clumsy but fierce. The second man swung his barrel toward her, but she ducked, ramming the rifle's stock into his mask, plastic cracking as he slumped. Vickers roared from the front, "Stop her!" The driver slammed the brakes, tires squealing, and she tumbled forward, crashing against the partition, pain exploding in her skull. She clawed the side door's latch, her fingers slick with blood, and it popped open, the van still rolling as she leapt out, hitting the gravel hard. Her knees buckled, but she rolled into the ditch, the storm drain swallowing her as the men shouted, boots pounding after her. She scrambled through the muck, water soaking her anew, the tunnel's darkness a cloak as she vanished from their sight. Gunshots cracked behind her, bullets ricocheting off concrete, but she kept moving, her breath a ragged prayer. The drain branched, and she veered left, splashing through ankle-deep sludge, her body screaming but her will iron. They'd lost her for now. The tunnel stretched on, a labyrinth of echoes and damp, until she found a maintenance hatch, its rusted bolts loose under her frantic kicks. She climbed out, emerging into a quiet alley near downtown, the city waking to a grey dawn. Her hoodie hung in tatters, blood and grime painting her skin, but she limped toward a diner, its neon sign flickering like a beacon. Inside she slipped, Into a bathroom, splashing water on her face, the mirror reflecting a stranger. Shaved head, swollen eyes, a warrior forged in fire. She pocketed a forgotten hairpin from the sink, picking her cuffs free with trembling hands. The metal clattering into the trash. A payphone hung on the wall outside, its receiver dangling, and she fed it a quarter scavenged from the floor. Dialing a number Marcus had drilled into her. His old DEA contact, a woman named Lena. The line crackled, then clicked. "Who's this?" Lena's voice was sharp, wary. "Aisha Brooks," she said, her throat tight. "Marcus is dead. Vickers killed him. I've got proof." Silence stretched, then Lena's tone softened. "Stay put. I'll find you." Aisha hung up, sinking into a booth, her body shaking as the adrenaline ebbed, leaving only grief. She pulled Marcus's DEA recorder from her hoodie's torn pocket, salvage from the safe house, its tape intact despite the chaos. She pressed play, his voice filling the air, deep and steady, a message recorded days ago. "Aisha, if you're hearing this, I'm gone. Vickers runs a cartel. Kessler's his dog. They've got cops, judges, the works, the warehouse, the safe house. They're covering their tracks. Get this to Lena. She'll know what to do. You're stronger than they think. Keep fighting." The tape clicked off, and tears burned her eyes, her fist clenching the device. He'd known, planned for this, trusted her to finish it. She wiped, her face shoving the recorder back into her pocket, the diner's hum fading as her resolve hardened. Sirens wailed outside, closer now, and she slipped out, blending into the morning crowd as newsstands blared headlines. "Terrorist teen kills. Father escapes." Vickers' lie was everywhere, plastered on screens and shop windows, Marcus's beaten face a grim trophy. She ducked into an alley, her legs leaden, and found a TV station's backlot, its satellite truck idling unattended. The recorder burned in her pocket, Marcus's voice her weapon, and she climbed inside, hot-wiring the controls with the hairpin, her hands steady despite the blood crusting her knuckles. The system flared to life, screens blinking as she hacked the feed, uploading the tape to override their broadcast. Her face appeared live, hijacking every channel in Atlanta, her voice raw but unshaken. "This is Aisha Brooks, Vickers and Kessler. Framed me. They killed my dad, tortured me, burned our safe house. Here's the truth." The recorder played, Marcus's words spilling out, naming names, exposing the cartel, the warehouse, the lies. She added her own. "They shaved my head, beat me, hunted me. I'm not a terrorist. They are." The feed cut to the warehouse footage. Kessler's cruelty, the explosion, undeniable proof shaking the city awake. Protests erupted outside, chants rising as tires screeched, sirens blaring toward the station. She slipped out, the broadcast looping, but Vickers' mercenaries stormed the lot, their black SUVs screeching to a halt. They dragged her from the truck, rifles trained, and hauled her to the rooftop, the city sprawling below as helicopters buzzed overhead. Vickers emerged, his beard stark against the dawn, a pistol in hand, his eyes glinting with cold fury. "You're a pest," he snarled, shoving her to the edge, the wind whipping her torn clothes. "Your daddy's dead and you're next." The news chopper hovered, its camera rolling, the world watching as he pressed the gun to her head, his finger tightening on the trigger. She stared him down, her breath steady, Marcus's voice echoing in her skull. "Keep fighting." The rooftop trembled under the chopper's downdraft. Vickers' men circling, their shouts lost in the roar. She'd hijacked the airwaves, shattered. His lies sparked a fire in the streets below, but here, cuffed and cornered, her breaking point loomed. The gun's barrel dug into her temple, Vickers' smirk a death mask, his victory seconds away. She'd pushed him to this, stripped his empire bare, and now he'd silence her, the world's eyes on her final stand. Her pulse thundered, her body spent, but her spirit blazed unbroken as the city held its breath below. The rooftop wind howled, tearing at Aisha Brooks' tattered hoodie as Captain Vickers pressed the pistol to her temple, its cold steel biting into her bruised skin. Atlanta sprawled below, a gray dawn breaking over a city ignited by her broadcast, her voice still echoing from screens she'd hijacked minutes ago. Her shaved scalp stung, blood crusting from countless cuts, her body a wreck of pain from Kessler's clippers. Vickers' torture, and the gunshot graze on her arm. The news chopper hovered above, its blades chopping the air, camera trained. On her as Vickers' mercenaries circled, rifles locked on her cuffed form. She'd stormed the TV station, played Marcus's tape, exposed their cartel and sparked protests in the streets. But now, cornered and alone, she faced the end. Her father's blood still wet in her memory. Vickers' salt and pepper beard twitched, with a smirk, his eyes glinting with triumph as he leaned in, his breath sour against her cheek. "How you thought you'd win, huh? Thought you'd take me down with your little show?" His finger tightened on the trigger, the click of the hammer deafening in the gusts. Aisha's heart slammed against her ribs, her breath steady despite the ache in every bone. Marcus's last words burned in her. Keep fighting. She'd freed him from that cell, lost him to Vickers' bullet, and clawed her way here, a lone spark against his empire. The world watched, the chopper's feed live, her truth out there, but this was it. Her breaking point, his victory. She stared into his gaze, unblinking, and whispered, "You're nothing without your lies." He laughed, a harsh bark lost. In the wind, and squeezed the trigger. Click, nothing. The gun jammed, the barrel silent, Vickers' smirk faltering as he jerked it back, slamming it with his palm. Aisha's pulse spiked, confusion flashing through her. But before she could move, a roar split the air. Not the chopper, not the wind, but boots storming the roof. The stairwell door blasted open, Marcus Brooks bursting through, alive. His towering frame clad in a bulletproof vest, shotgun blazing as DEA agents swarmed behind him. Vickers' men spun, rifles barking, but Marcus fired, dropping 2 in a spray of blood, his team cutting through the rest with lethal precision. Aisha's knees buckled, her mind reeling as Marcus charged Vickers, slamming him with the shotguns. Stock, the pistol flying from his grip. Vickers staggered, shock twisting his face, and Aisha tackled him, her cuffed hands a blur as she drove her elbow into his jaw, bone cracking under the blow. He stumbled back, teetering on the roof's edge, and she lunged again, shoving him with every ounce of her battered strength. He flailed, arms windmilling, and fell, a scream ripping from his throat as he plummeted 5 stories, crashing through a news van below in a crunch of metal and glass, his body still as blood pooled beneath the wreckage. The chopper's spotlight swiveled, capturing Vickers' end, the feed live to millions, but Aisha barely saw it. She turned, gasping, as Marcus pulled her into his arms, his chest heaving, blood staining his vest where Vickers' bullet had hit. "You're alive," she choked, tears burning her eyes, her hands clutching him as if he'd vanish again. He nodded, his voice rough but warm. Vest took it, faked the rest, had to lure him out. He'd sabotaged Vickers' gun days ago, a fail-safe she'd never known. His death a gambit to expose the cartel's kingpin, banking on her. To light the fuse, the DEA agents secured the roof, cuffing the surviving mercenaries, their radios crackling with orders as sirens wailed below. Marcus cut her cuffs with a knife from his belt, his calloused hands steady despite the blood on his shirt. "You did it, baby girl," he said, pride swelling in his eyes. Tape got to Lena. She mobilized the team. Vickers thought he'd won, but you flipped it. Aisha's breath hitched, the weight of it crashing over her. The warehouse, the safe house, the media storm, Marcus's execution, all leading here, a reversal no one saw coming. She'd hijacked the broadcast, shattered their lies, and now Vickers was dead, his empire exposed by the father and daughter he'd underestimated. Police flooded the streets below, not Vickers' corrupt puppets, but real cops, alerted by Lena's DEA strike, their lights flashing as crowds chanted Aisha's name. The chopper's feed shifted, showing Vickers' broken body, then Marcus standing tall, alive, a national hero dismantling a cartel from the shadows. Aisha leaned against him, her legs trembling, the city's roar washing over her like a tide. Kessler was still out there, a loose thread, but Vickers' fall cracked the machine wide open. Marcus squeezed her shoulder, his voice a low thunder. "We're not done yet, but this is ours." They descended the stairs, DEA agents flanking them, the building a hive of chaos as news crews swarmed the lobby, shouting questions Marcus waved off. Outside, the air was thick with smoke and dawn, protesters cheering as they emerged, a sea of fists raised for justice. Aisha's yarn wig was gone, her head bare and scarred, but she stood taller, Marcus's arm around her a pillar of strength. The chopper followed, its lens trained on them, broadcasting their triumph to a world waking to the truth. Vickers' death was a shockwave, his cartel unraveling as Lena's team raided his network, arrests rolling in live on every channel. They reached a DEA van, its doors open, medics rushing to Marcus's side as he waved them off, his leg wound. From Ruiz's shot still oozing but secondary now. Aisha climbed in beside him, her body sinking into the seat, exhaustion clawing at her as the adrenaline bled out. The medics patched her arm, gauze wrapping the graze, but she barely felt it. Her eyes locked on Marcus, alive, unbroken, her anchor through the storm. He pulled a medal from his pocket, a DEA commendation he'd earned years ago, and pressed it into her hand. "Yours now," he said, his voice thick. "You're the hero here." The van rolled toward headquarters, the city blurring past, news tickers flashing updates. Cartel leader dead, DEA agent alive, teen exonerated. Aisha clutched the medal, its weight grounding her, the protests swelling into a roar of vindication. She'd sung at that talent show a lifetime ago, her braids a crown Kessler stole. But now she'd sung a different song, one of fire and truth, her voice toppling giants. Marcus watched her, his smile faint but fierce. The ex-Marine who'd faked his death to save her, to save them all. The van stopped, agents ushering them into a briefing room, Lena waiting with files and a nod of respect. Days later, Aisha stood on a stage, not the talent show's rickety platform, but a grand podium at a federal ceremony, Marcus beside her, his leg bandaged but steady. The crowd stretched endless, thousands cheering as Lena pinned medals on them both. The DEA chief hailing Marcus as a legend, Aisha as a force of justice. She stepped to the mic, her voice raw but clear, no wig needed now, her scars a badge of survival. "They took my hair, my dad, my life," she said, the city hushed. "But we took it back. This is for every kid they tried to break." Her song came next. Not the ballad from that night, but a new one born in pain and triumph, her notes soaring over the crowd, defiant and unbroken. Marcus joined her, his deep hum a harmony to her fire, their duet a roar that shook the air. The crowd erupted, applause thundering for minutes, tears streaking faces as cameras rolled, the nation watching a father and daughter reclaim their story. Kessler's face flashed on a screen, "Wanted" stamped beside it, his fate a shadow still hunting justice, but here now they'd won. Aisha's voice faded, her hand in Marcus's, the city theirs, a testament to resilience no cartel could bury. This gripping tale of Aisha Brooks and her father Marcus unveils profound lessons about resilience, justice, and the human spirit. First, it teaches that courage can thrive in the darkest moments. Aisha faced relentless racial injustice, her hair shaved, her dignity stripped, her father killed, yet she fought back, turning pain into power. Her story shows that strength isn't loud, it's the quiet resolve to rise after every fall. Second, it exposes the systemic rot of corruption, where figures like Vickers and Kessler wield authority to oppress, not protect. Their downfall proves that truth, though buried, can claw its way out with enough grit. Third, it underscores the bond of family as an unbreakable shield. Marcus's sacrifice and cunning reversal, faking his death to topple Vickers, highlight how love can outsmart hate. Finally, it reveals the double-edged sword of perception. The media twisted Aisha into a villain, but her broadcast flipped the script, showing one voice can shift a tide. The journey isn't just survival, it's a call to question who writes the narrative and who pays the price. Aisha's song at the end isn't just music, it's a war cry for those silenced by prejudice, proving defiance can rewrite history. What resonates most is this: justice isn't given, it's taken. So, what would you do if the world turned against you? How far would you go to reclaim your truth? Drop your thoughts below, hit like if this moved you, and subscribe to catch more tales of unbreakable spirits. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. Let's spark a conversation. Thanks for joining Aisha and Marcus on this wild ride. May you find your own strength to stand tall against the storm,